Welcome to My Life Chassidus Applied, episode 74. Being that is the beginning of the 3 weeks, today is Shivasa B'Tamaz Nitcha, which means that the fast that was pushed off from Shabbos is today. So let's begin with a discussion about that and the applied Chassidus that's relevant to our lives. Let me make an announcement before we begin. To submit your questions, please go to meaningfullife.com/mylife. Where you have a form, you can anonymously submit your questions. I would also be pleased to announce a new feature. Due to popular demand, we have a new feature, a new My Life podcast. The weekly broadcast can now be accessed and streamed from iTunes. You can get it by visiting our website or searching for My Life, which is one word, My Life, in the iTunes store, and these episodes will be available immediately afterwards on Monday following each episode. The questions continue to come in, the encouraging words, support, and all the ripple effect that Chassidus Applied has had is extremely gratifying, humbling, and obviously above all confirms what the Rabbi always wanted and continue to want from us, which is take Chassidus and apply it to our lives. And every aspect of Chassidus, it touches and speaks about every aspect of our lives. You just have to find the match. So, being, as I said, the beginning of the 3 weeks, let's start with Shavasa B'Tamuz and Bein Hamtzarim, which means between the straits, the dire straits. So there's a number of sichos from the Rebbe and Mamorim, and Erateire and Masei and many places that talk about this period in time. So I'll just sum up the general gist of it in context of our own lives. Everything in Yiddishkeit, everything in Torah, everything in Kol Chelkei Torah, every part of Torah is meant to be a Heirah B'Chaim, a lesson in our lives, a guide. As the Medrash says, the Torah is like a blueprint. So even the calendar and its changes, even its ups and downs, all is reflective in our own states of being. Which means the Jewish calendar is not just a nice calendar that we follow, but it also reflects as a mirror image of our lives. So just like you have the month of Adar, represents Mishanichnas Adar Marbim B'Simcha, a joyous month. There's the month of Mamayitim B'Simcha. So the ups and downs of the calendar cycles reflect the ups and downs of our lives. So when you think of a time of the year which reflects so-called a more somber moment, a moment when we may be challenged with some difficulty, a setback, the 3 weeks is that. That's what we feel. Bein Hamtzarim. You feel pressured. You feel a certain level of distress even. Hopefully not in a terrible way, but the type of pressure that life puts on us, that's Bein Hamtzarim. The question is, how do you deal with that? So Chassidus explains that every Yerid is Tzerech Aliyah, every descent is in order to bring to a greater and higher ascent. So when you have a moment that seems to be a setback, or seems to be a concealment, or some type of challenge, it's really bepnimius, part of an Aliyah, part of a higher ascent, and you have to see it through. There's the famous mashal of the Baal Shem Tov about Schwindeltrepp. Schwindeltrepp in Yiddish is a translation of spiral staircase. Why is it called Schwindel? In Yiddish, Schwindel means swindle. Not just spiral, swindling staircase. Why? Because it swindles you into thinking you're not climbing. When you climb up a regular staircase, so you can see the destination. It may be a long stair, many steps to get there. When you go a spiral staircase, it turns. And every time you get higher, you have to turn your back completely to the destination. To the point when you get right before the apex, you get to the highest point, you need to turn entirely the other direction, where you can be deceived into thinking nothing's happened, you're not reached there. Many of us stop right there. You have to see it through. It's all part of a journey. That's why it's called, it swindles you into thinking you're not there. So the key to understanding challenges in life is what we learn from the 3 weeks, starting from Shavasa B'Tamuz. We learn from it that though it's a descent, and it has its halachas and its limitations, but it's really bepnimius, ultimately to bring us to a greater place. The destruction of the temple in order to build us a permanent Beis HaMikdash, Mikdash Ad Nekein Yadecha, with Mashiach's coming. So everything has in it two elements, what you see and where it's leading to. The Rebbe goes even further and says, even what you see in truth is also leading. It's not just a step. It's part of the Aliyah. Just like Seisra Manas Livnis. When you raise a building with a Z, why are you doing it? So someone will come and say, hey, you're destroying a building. Someone else sees it through and says, 1 second, they're destroying this building, so in order they should be able to have the space to build a far better building. Rabbi Akiva looked at the same Harabayas, at the same desolate Harabayas, Har Moriah, where the Temple Mount, the same desolate Temple Mount as his colleagues, and they cried because they saw Shu'olim, fox, roaming there as if it was a wilderness. And Rabbi Akiva laughed. When they asked him why, because they saw the fulfillment of the Nevuah, the first half, how there'll be destruction. And he saw the second half as well, because he was Rabbi Akiva. He came Akiva from the word Akev. He was a Geir or Ben Geirim. He was able to see in the Tachtin, in the low, he saw how it was part of something far greater. And his whole life story was that as well. So he was able to see in darkness the deeper light. Rabbi Akiva also had to sit Shiva on Tisha B'Av. But yet, he was able to see there's something more, and Akiva Nechamtani twice, because he's Menachem them like Nachmu for the Gili, and for the Gili that comes from the Helam. So it's even a deeper type of revelation and Nechama. This is the meaning of the 3 weeks, that there's a true deeper Aliyah involved. There's a number of sikhs that I would refer you to, which is appropriate to read, especially this time of the year. Let's begin with the Sikha in Tafshin Nun, on the Sikha the Rebbe speaks about. Start the 3 weeks, Shabbos Pasha Pinchas. He talks about why is it 3 weeks? 3 is always a positive thing. Chazaka, 3 shows on something permanent. 3 is Midas HaTiferes. 3 is not in Toyu. You have 2 kavim. Toyu is chaos. It would seem to be more appropriate. It should be 2 weeks. Or something in the number of 2. 3 indicates something permanent. And the Rebbe says this is the exact reason. Because there's a deeper inyan, there's a deeper concept, there's a deeper power in the 3. We see, on the external level, we only see the outer dimension. But in truth, therein lies the power of the kiyum, of the eternity of 3. There's also a very powerful maimer from Rabbi Hillel Parasha that the Rebbe brings, bases a sikh in Chelik Beis, a famous moshel, which I'll refer to in a moment, that it's called Isa Bepsikta. In Psikta, we have the Psikta says that there's Shiva, the Shleisha, the Puranusa. That's the 3 weeks of Puranusa of infliction or affliction or retribution. Then you have Shiva de Nechemta, followed by 7 weeks of consolation, followed by Tarta de Tiyufta. It's a Galoshin in Gemara, but the Psikta explains it. What's Tarta Tiyufta? 2 weeks of Tshuva. This is referring to the Haftarahs that all year round the Haftarahs said about the content of the weekly Pasha, except of course Yom Tevim and other periods of the year, but except these 11 weeks, these 12 weeks I should say, that the 3 weeks of Puranusa, the Haftarahs are all about the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, followed by 7 Haftarahs that are all about the consolation, starting from Nachmu, Shabbos Nachmu, followed by 2 weeks of the 2 Haftarahs that come from Rosh Hashanah till Sukkot that are about Tshuva. So the themes there are related to the time of the year as opposed to the Parsha, even though it all has a connection. And there's the famous Psikta brought by the Avud Raham, the Rebbe quotes it how the 7 weeks of consolation is all a dialogue between the Eibishter and Eden. We'll discuss this those coming weeks. But the question is about the 3, the Tlosa, the Purunisa. Purunisa means Puranius. It's a time of retribution, a time of punishment. And yet it's Tlosa, so that Rabbi Hillel in this Maimer, that the Rebbe brings in a number of places. Also, just to quote one, is Shabbos Chazay and Shabbos Devarim Tafshin Nun. In Tafshin Tes, I should say, I should correct myself, Tafshin Nun. And the Rebbe brings there that, what does he say, what's the content of the theme? That the Tlosa Puranis is the Gimel Meichen, and the Shiva de Nechemta is the 7 Midas. And he gives the famous moshel. What's the moshel? The moshel of a teacher and a student, where the teacher is conveying information, transmitting information, but then he has a deep desire to convey a completely new chiddush to his student. But it's such a new chiddush, so completely different and infinitely apart and distant from everything he's been teaching. The only way for him to convey it is by first pausing, becoming silent. So he's quiet and he's collecting his thoughts, going deeper into his mind to be able to convey this out of his deep love. The student, on the other hand, all he hears is silence. The flow has stopped. The teacher stopped speaking. So he can confuse and mistakenly think the teacher has abandoned him. He's no longer here. He went off somewhere. But in truth, it's the gili of a deeper pnimis dika chidush and eir that requires a moment of silence or a pause. So Rabbi, and the Rebbe says, Pashtus is miyusad amamorim from the Samach Tzedek, or even earlier, says the 3 weeks is the gimel mechen, it's the silence. It's the Eibishter in a sense going back to the mechen that moves itself from midas, from connecting to another, in order to be able to access a deeper gili. And you don't see it till after the 3 weeks comes the Shiva de Nechemta, where the mechen comes into the midas. So you see here that the 3 weeks but Pnimius is a far higher revelation, except it's not revealed yet to the student. And we shouldn't misunderstand this Helam in the wrong way. We have to always understand that Helam is B'Shvil HaGili. In a Sikha that is in Chelik Yud Ches, Yud Beis Tammuz, the Rebbe goes even further and says that the Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz, the Chag HaGeula, actually is like a Magdim Refuah Lamaka. In the later generations, as we come closer to Mashiach, it reveals the Pnimius of Tammuz. So till Gimel Tammuz, we only had Shivasa B'Tammuz. We saw the negative side of it. And in Tafresh Pei Zayin, the Geula came, it revealed the Pnimius of Tammuz. It's a whole beautiful Sikha, powerful Sikha about this theme, which is printed in Chelik Yud Ches, the Yud Beis Gimel Tammuz, page 308 and on. Where there he also cites the two different contradictions in Tammuz. Sometimes Tammuz is a name of Avodah Zarah. In other places it says Tammuz, the warm months, is a revelation of Gil Elokus, Shem Shemagan Hashem Elokim. How do you reconcile the two? She says exactly the same thing. Bechetzeni is, it could be Avodah Zarah. We spoke last episode, like the summer can be a lot of nisyanis. The warmth, the relaxation, the comforts. But Bepnimius, it's a Gili Elokus of a higher level that we have to be wise to be able to access and reveal. Which also explains the same question I asked, and that was asked to me last week's episode, and I explained, how do you reconcile that? Some Mamorim it says, B'yem Yashmin Etzeres, Lamed Beis, and Ayin Zayin, and some places, in some other places, that it's easier to serve God in the summer months. On the other hand, we have the Nisyanis and challenges that in the summer that don't exist. The same thing. There's a Pnimius and there's a Chetzenis. So it's a worthwhile Sikha to read, and especially in context of Yud Beis Tammuz and so on. There's also a Sikha I want to refer to, the Simchas Teira Tov Shemem Zayin. It's one of the Sikhas that stand out among Sikhas, a unique moment. I remember it vividly for many reasons, especially the drama and the emotions that the Rebbe rarely cried like that on Simchas Teira especially. So the Rebbe's Nekuda there, and it's also printed, but it's captured far more in the Hanocha because it's not so-called filtered or edited. And you have the whole raw discussion of the Rebbe where he would speak a Rashi, but there's never a Rashi in Parsha Bracha because Parsha Bracha is never on Shabbos. In other words, you don't read. You read it always on Simchas Teira. So the Rebbe said that Simchas Teira, he's going to explain that Rashi. What Rashi? The last Rashi in Chumash about Yeshakechecha Sheshivarto. The Eibishter says to that the Rashi says, and it says at the end of the Teira, it says L'chola Eitzes V'Hamefsim Asher Osam Moshe Le'enei Kol Yisrael. All the miracles and wonders and signs that Moshe did before the eyes of all Eden. Rashi says, what did he do before all Eden? He broke the luchas. And the Eibishter said, Yeshakechecha Sheshivarta. The Rebbe made a whole sturim. What's come davor? Since when is breaking the luchas, which is Shivasa B'Tammuz, today, yesterday, is a positive thing. Eisus and Mefsis that he did in a positive way. We fast because of it, breaking the luchas. What's the Yeshakechecha Sheshivarta? And why would Rashi choose this? There are a lot of miracles. Yitzias Mitzrayim, Matan Teira, Kriyas Yamsuf, Matan Teira, through the 40 years of the wilderness. And when you end the Teira, it's supposed to Simon B'Tev. Why end with something that's seemingly a negative and it's literally changing Pshat and Pasuk? The Pasuk seems to be talking about a positive thing, and Rashi brings in seemingly a negative thing. And what's the Eshekeichecha, which also indicates on positive. B'kitzur Nimritz, the Rebbe began crying when he started explaining it in an unbelievable way. You could see he was talking about a Rebbe, he was talking about himself, he was talking about a Nasi, and he said of all the things Moshe did, the greatest thing of all was the Shviras HaLuchos. Why? Because why did he break the Luchos? Not like everybody thinks. He got angry, he lost control. God forbid. It was a deliberate act. The Luchos is the Ksuba. Rashi says in Parashat Kisisa. It's the marriage contract. The Eden heard La Yeh Lecha L'kim Acherim 40 days earlier, 39 days earlier, Moshe went up on the mountain. But they didn't receive the Luchos yet. They didn't accept the contract. It was more only a type of commitment b'dibur. When Moshe saw what they did, they betrayed, he decided immediately, let's tear the contract. And that way, in a sense, the Jews are not completely guilty. I mean, they were obviously guilty and responsible, and he demanded that from them. But he wanted to keep that element that he can go back to the Eibush and say they didn't receive it. So it was his greatest act of Avisel. Einei Kol Yisrael. Kol Eisa Mevsim. Rashi is looking, what could be the biggest thing he did? Yitzis Mitzrayim, great. Kriyas Yamsuf, Mountain Torah. But what's the greatest thing? Where he sacrificed the Torah itself, his life. What's the Luchos? The Luchos were Mamash Michtav Elakim, Maisa Elakim. They were engraved and shaped by the Eibishter. We all know, God forbid, what happens, Achmana Litzlan, if a Sefer Torah falls down by accident. It's considered a whole bad omen, if the fast, etc., etc. Here it's not a Sefer Torah, here's the Sefer Torah of all Sefer Torah. Luchos, engraved. And the first Luchos, Moshe goes, deliberately breaks them. Mamash, the Kus itself. And then when he challenges God, and Eibishter doesn't want to forgive, he says, Macheni no mesifrecha. Erase my name from the Sefer, from your Sefer. Giving up not just Gashmis, he's giving up not just Ruchni, he's giving up his whole Chaya Nitzchim. Macheni no mesifrecha. Erase me from what? From your Torah, from Torah's Chayim. But this is the ultimate symbol, the ultimate expression of what a Nasi is. That completely selfless, has nothing to do with him. He is here to serve the people. You're not going to forgive the people. You want me to create a new nation? I'm out of here. To God he's saying this. That's why it's the greatest thing of all. That's Yishakeicha Sheshevarta. That's the premise of Shviras HaLuchos. Now, come over, we would have preferred there shouldn't be any breaking of the Luchos, and there should have been no Chet Egel. But La'achrei Amaisa, after the fact, that's what a Nasi does. And in Samach Vav, he talks about Ebazeh, what happened? Luchos Shnias. He finally got the Salachta Kidvarecha. So not only did they have Luchos Sheshenis, the broken Luchos remain in the Aron. Why are they in the Aron? Before we get to the Samach Vav, because they're not discarded, because there's a premise in it. The breaking itself has something positive in it. Shvos B'Tammuz is the breach of the wall, just like the breaking of the Luchos, another crack. These cracks have unbelievable power when you know how to see through them and know how to transform them. And so therefore, the broken Luchos, those parts remained in the Od. But he also got Luchos Shnias, the second mile, with Yom Kippur. Salachta Kidvarecha, he prevailed. It took him 80 days, but he prevailed. So Samach Vav asks the question, Chayte Nisker. If that's the case, the sinner gets rewarded. Not only they got a Luchos Shnias, which in many ways is greater than Luchos Sheshenis. Without it, we wouldn't have Teresh Shabbat Peh and Medrashim, etc., as the Gemara says. So the Rebbe Rashab explains, it's the Yegiyah, the break, it's the Yegiyah's HaVeda, Shviras HaEvan, that brings out a deeper Koyach. And Dafka Taki the Yerida brings a higher Aliyah. And the premise of the Yerida is this Aliyah. The lesson in our personal lives is very clear. Every one of us goes through our experiences, things that have been broken, a betrayal, a trust, an abandonment, someone hurt you. Number one, no, nothing can destroy you. It's just a question of being able to grow through it. Now, many of us, we lick our wounds, we feel like we're damaged, we feel like we're hurt, we're depressed, we withdraw, we're afraid to engage. Comes Shivasa B'Tammuz and says, the wall was breached, the Luchos were broken on this day, the other three things that happened, sad things that happened on this day in Shivasa B'Tammuz, but know that B'Primis at all is even a greater strength. And that's the Chassidish approach to life in general, and especially to challenges. And that's why, with these 3 weeks, become the internally, they are the three Gili HaMeichin, that's Meichin Chadoshim, new Meichin, new levels, unprecedented revelations that would not achieve any other time of the year. So that's a brief summary of the Shavuos B'Tammuz, the 3 weeks. Now, how do we reveal it? So the Rebbe tells us practically. Every possible way. The end of the Sikh in Yudbeis Tammuz, the one I said, Chelik Ches, says every possible way. Though we obviously have to fulfill the Din Avelis, no weddings and music and all the other limitations, but every possible way up Piteda, we have to add in Simcha. Kudei Yisharim, Hashem Yisharim Mesamchilev. Starting by learning Teda. Especially Hilchos Beis HaBchira, which helps us rebuild. It says in the Medrash that anyone who learns Beis HaBchira, the Eibishter told Yecheskel, B'mayla v'alav HaKosov, kol ha'esik b'teiras, when you're esik in the Teda of something, the Teda considers as if you're rebuilding it. So we transform these days by turning it into impetus and a springboard for new revelations, for new simcha, wherever possible. And of course, sim b'mishpat tipad v'shaveh b'tzedakah, to add in limud HaTorah and in tzedakah. And above all, in Avos Yisrael, Avos Chinam, which counters the sinas chinam, the baseless hatred that helped cause the base destruction of the especially Bayis Sheni. So we counter that. So we take a negative time, and with all its limitations, and we turn it to a catalyst for positive growth. And this is both on a microcosm level, personally, and of course, collectively. Okay. With that said, let us go right into a few questions that are related to this topic of the 3 weeks and Avos Yisrael. Every year at this time, someone writes, the women in my community get together to learn Hilchos Beis HaBchira. That's the laws in the Rambam of the Beis HaMikdash, which the Rebbe in his Heirah indicates that we should learn Psukim and Yecheskel and Teresh B'Ksav. He talks about the midas, the measurements and the elements of the third Beis HaMikdash. In Shas, it's Masechta Midas, Masechta Tamid, but Masechta Midas primarily. And in Halacha, it's the Rambam Hilchos Beis HaBchira. So the question is asking, every time, this time the women in my community get together to learn Hilchos Beis HaBchira. While it's really inspiring that everyone gets together, it always seems to me that we could be learning something more practical. There are all these intricate details that frankly no one understands. Do you have any deeper insights that will inspire me during this learning, or a suggestion on how to get more out of it? Making time to learn is always difficult with our busy lives, and I get really disappointed when the time is allotted, but I don't feel impacted or enriched by the learning taking place. Thanks. Well, there's an expression in the Gemara that says sometimes, Karahi Svara Lamali. If we have an actual pasuk, a verse that states something, you don't need to have a logical explanation. Why do you need a logical explanation? And when you have a logical explanation, you don't need to have a kara, svarihi, kara lamali. You don't need a verse. Here we have both. First of all, let's start with the Rebbe himself. The Rebbe gave this directive. So, number one, that is enough reason, whether you understand it or not, whether it makes sense to you, whether you feel enriched or not, it's not relevant. It's a direct heirah from the Rebbe, and based on Midrashim and Psukim, that when Yecheskel complained to the Eibishter and said, what's going to be after the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed, so the Eibishter told him, here's what the Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi will look like, and the Medrash says that when you'll study it, it'll be considered as if you're building the Beis HaMikdash. You don't understand it all? Fine. And who understands everything? But the learning itself is a way of helping rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. So the other learning may be geschmackig. You may find more pleasure in it. Find this. So learn all other things too. It's where your heart desires. But this has specific significance in our time. And that's what we have to be focusing on. That's the kra. Even if you don't understand. As far as Svara goes, Adarab. Think about it. Why when learning the Beis HaMikdash does it help rebuild the Beis HaMikdash? Besides the fact that because the Torah is the blueprint, it's Taka Baraisa, when you look in Torah, the world is created. Because the Beis HaMikdash parallels our lives. The Beis HaMikdash was built in the same structure as a human being is built. There are 3 sections. There's a Holy of Holies, a Kodesh, and a Azara or El Moed. So you have 3 sections. We have the mind, the head, Moyach, Leiv, Kovid. Basically the head the torso, and the legs. And just like you have the three, what do you have in the Holy of Holies? You have the Adon, which is the mind. That's our brain. In the chest and the torso, we have three, the right, left, and center. So you have the same three. You have the menorah, you have the shulchan, and you have the mizbeach haprimi, hakteris, the inner altar, the candelabra, the menorah, and the shulchan, the table. And then you have on the outside your mizbeach hachitzon, the mizbeach hakarbonis, where they bring the nafesh habamis. You transform the material world, and then you elevate it through the other two levels. So this is discussed the Shalah, Rabbeinu Bechaye. There's an entire sefer called Teres Ha'ela from the Ramah, Rav Moshe Isserlish, the commentator, the Mappa, the so-called tablecloth of the Shulchan Aruch HaMechaber. Shulchan Aruch is like a set table, so they call Mappa. The Mappa is the commentary on the Beis Yosef in Shulchan Aruch. So he has a whole sefer called Teres Ha'ela, which indicates and shows you the parallels of the entire everything in the Beis Hamikdash in our own personal lives. And the Rebbe has a Rishima, a long Rishima on the Menorah and other places where he explains it at length. So Adrabah, what's better thing to learn? What's geschmacker thing to learn about yourself as it parallels in the Beis Hamikdash? So it's true there are intricate laws, some of them are more complicated, but they're also reflective of you, what makes you tick. V'shachanti b'seicham, as the Shalah explains. Why does it say b'seicham? I will rest among you. It says also the Migdash. It should have said v'shachanti b'seichei. You build for me a sanctuary and I will rest in it. Build for me a sanctuary, I'll rest in them. But there's no them, it's an it. Because the purpose is that you rest in each of us, because each of us is essentially built in the model of the temple, of the Beis HaMikdash. And the Beis HaMikdash is not for God to rest in stones and wood, but it's to rest within us. So the Beis HaMikdash is like a mamutza, a channel of bringing Elokus into our personal lives. Today we don't have a physical Beis HaMikdash, so we have a Ruchnizdika, which is each of us, our homes, and our beings and our bodies. So what more, what geschmacker thing to learn than that? What's more pleasurable? So on the contrary, if you have a class that's boring, spice it up. Ask questions, challenge, bring a teacher that can explain the relevance of these details. And that will definitely make this learning far greater and more enriched. But that's in addition to what I said before, that the Rebbe says this is directive, and then you can go ahead and try to explain and make it even more pleasant and pleasurable and so on. Next question, about Avos Yisrael. The 3 weeks is upon us. Can you please give us more practical steps on bringing more Avos Yisrael in our community, which we know is the best way to counter the din and bring Mashiach? Okay, a few more questions about Avos Yisrael. I have a nephew, another question, who is not that frum, but is a true tzaddik. He will fly to the end of the world to help out someone in need. Firstly, if folks would show him the Avos Yisrael that the Rabbeim cried out for, he would be frumer. Secondly, the Gemilas Chasam that he does on a daily basis trumps the standards of my other nephews that wouldn't give me a ride to the corner, though they are shluchim. Okay, well, it's not exactly Avos Yisrael to say that at this period of time, but I'm reading a letter, so I'm just conveying, and I'll comment on that in a moment. The Rebbe tied almost everything he said to Torah, Aveda, and Gemilas Chasadim. So why don't you also say that Chasadim, the Chassidim, who are Asik, and those aspects daily are on a higher standard in the Rebbe's book? You won't have trouble backing that up, just literally flip to any page of the Rebbe's writings. Question 3. In Lubavitch, I think we not only have to be careful about avoiding Lashon Hara like everyone else, but in the area of Avos Yisrael, I honestly feel that too many have an elitist, snobby attitude towards others for different nonsensical reasons, which could include background, dress, weight, wealth, intelligence issues, etc. I know it's coming from insecurities on the snobby person's end, but it is still so painful that this may be the last inyan needed to merit Mashiach's arrival. And one more question. I've noticed that when other people disappoint me or wrong me, I struggle very much with the negative feelings. I want to learn how to forgive more easily. I know the power of our thoughts and words, and knowing that, I'm not quite sure what to do with feelings of disappointment or loss of respect. My parents have told me throughout my teens that I'm overly analytical and slightly self-righteous. What are tools for this situation, and how can I train myself to have more Avos Yisrael to the extent of blind love, ignoring their flaws, their mistakes, or sometimes even the pain they've caused, or feelings of resentment? Okay. Very good questions. Avos Yisrael is the biggest mitzvah, of course, in the Torah. Rabbi Kiva says that Klal Gadol B'Torah, it's one of the Yud Beis Psukim that Rabbi chose, Mamor Chazal. Hillel's word, Zuhi Kol HaTorah. When the potential convert came to see him, what's the Torah standing on one foot? Amada olach soni l'chavercha lesavid. That which you dislike, do not do unto others. Essentially, the negative side of V'ahavtarecha kamecha. Chassidus explains why Svarim explain why the Hillel said it in the negative, but it's the same idea. Zui kol ha-Torah kol. This is the entire Torah. Gemara and Shabbos, Daf Lamed. The Idach Pirush is Zil Gemara. Everything else is commentary and go study. So it's very clear that it's the foundation of all of Yiddishkeit, of all Torah, of all of life, you could say. Pichsidis, you have Mitzvah Avos Yisrael and Derech Mitzvah. You have a number in other places that Rebbe brought together when he made the Kuntras Avos Yisrael and Tavshel Lamed Vav, a collection of fundamental principles of Avos Yisrael, that it's essentially the foundation, and for obvious reasons. You look at Perek Lev and Tanya, because it captures the essence of the purpose of existence. Love, Lev, heart. His Gabrus Hatsur Allah Chemer, the spirit dominating over matter. When you make Neshama Iker, the Neshama is primary and the body is secondary, that's how you have Avos Yisrael. If you make the body Iker, which means your personal and selfish self, is for number one, and the soul is secondary, then we have Pirud, everyone has their own self-interest. It's the essence of what he says there. That's why Kol HaTorah Kula, that's why Taka Kol HaTorah, that explains Hillel's statement. Baal Shem Tov made this a foundation of Chassidus. The question is, if such a big mitzvah, the greatest of them all, why is it so difficult? And why people don't see it being, this is the thing you should be doing more than anything else. You have people who consider themselves kanoim, zealots, about this mitzvah, that mitzvah, all beautiful. How many people do you know are kanoim about Avos Yisrael? There was a guy once came to me, no names, and he wanted me to help him raise some money for a mikveh, introduce him to some people. He came from Yerushalayim, and he gives me this introduction. He's dressed in the whole levush, chassidish levush, shmeina begodim, as they say, and he gives me introduces himself that he's a kanoi. He's a zealot. So I said to him, "What are you a zealot in?" He says, "What do you mean? What I'm a zealot in Yiddishkeit, in Torah?" So I said, "What specifically?" He wouldn't answer. So I said to him, "You know what? I'll make a deal with you. I'll take you not only to the person you want me to introduce you to, I'll take you to every gvir I know, if you demonstrate that you're a zealot, a kanoi in Avos Yisrael." He literally started berating me and insulting me. "What do you know? Who are you?" You know. As we're speaking it. Why, I was thinking, why is there kanois in every detail in Digdu Kal, Divrei Sofrim, Pesach, other things, all beautiful. Let people be as firm as they want to be. But obviously, so you don't hear such a obsession. The reason is because obviously, Yisrael, like he says in Tanya Perek Lev, is about dealing with the self. And our self is number one to all of us. It's relatively easy to be a kanoi in a mitzvah like shatnez, or kashrus, or the hidurim of Pesach. It's all about you. And now you're muhud. Fine, it's angeton and kedusha. But obviously, so means it's not all about you. The you is the problem. So you could be a novel b'rishus HaTorah, you could be a yesh misha'ev, you could be someone who does all the Torah mitzvahs, but the you has not been handled. It all became part of the self. Better than nothing. But when Hillel said, Kol HaTorah Kula, this is Avos Yisrael, what was he saying? Not only Ben Adam Lechavere. That's obvious. Hachnas Sarchim and Bikr Chelim and all the mitzvahs, tzedakah, you do kindness, it's an extension of loving another. Like you love yourself. But what about mitzvahs like davening and kosher and tumah and tara? There's a whole body of Torah Ben Adam L'Mokim. So the Alter Rebbe, though he doesn't ask the question explicitly, but he answers it in Perek Lev. Because Kol HaTorah is his Gabrus Hatzur Allah Chemer. Not only when you're treating another. Every aspect of Torah, davening, even things you do between God and you, is sublimating and spiritualizing a material, selfish world. So everything is Mada Olach Sani. Shabbos should spill over, because you're more ruchnisdik, so b'meli you're more giving. You're more less self, less yesh. The fact that you see some people can be kanoim and be mahadin in so many mitzvahs, and lacking that, they're missing the boat. Is it better than nothing? Surely. But they're missing the boat. It's not zu kol hateiros kula. That explains why you also find people who are extremely loving, and then that begoli they don't yet have Torah mitzvahs for whatever reason, tinik shenishba. So obviously with Torah mitzvahs it would be even better, because the whole point is of love, of ave, and of Torah mitzvahs is to sublimate, to make neshama ikar and guf tafel, to make ruchnis ikar and guf and gashmis tafel, to make the world a keli for elikus, which, as he says in Tanya, everything kedusha is based on bittul. Everything not bittul is yesh and klipa. So that's the bottom line. That's why it's so difficult. So what's the Eitzi Utza? What do we do? So Alter Rebbe says there, become more spiritual person. Stop focusing so much on your selfishness and on your material being and material gains and so on. How do you do that? Well, number one, that's the whole point of Chassidus She'id, is knows that the self is not number one. Now, obviously, you could do Avos Yisrael in action, even if you haven't completely sublimated yourself. At least act in that way. But I wanted to point out why Yedias Hamachla Chetzi Refu. It's important to understand the challenge. And as the Rebbe brings from the Ramban and the Even HaEzer, there's different versions. That l'cheira, how could you even demand Avos Yisrael? You could say love another, but like yourself, Adam Koravetz La'atzmi. The only answer ultimately is the Perek Lamed Beis, because we also have a neshama. Which comes down to simply this. Just like there's the question, how could you command someone to have love? You can't regulate emotions. You could say to someone, give tzedakah even if you're not in the mood. Keep Shabbos even if you're not in the mood. But how could there be a mitzvah, haftas Hashem lekecha, and the same question can be asked about haftas lecha kamecha? You could say, help somebody even if you don't like them, or even if you don't have a feeling. You're neutral. How do you regulate an emotion? So the Maggid asks and answers the question. The mitzvah is on the hisbonenus. You contemplate. The Rebbe asked the question, Chassidus asked the question, but then the mitzvah should have been, not v'hafta, it should have been, hisboinen. B'mailas Hashem, or like the Rambam says, Keitzid Yovei La'avosei L'Yosei. How do you come to love and know of God? By contemplating on someone. So Chassidus says no, because contemplation is automatically going to lead to the feeling. When you contemplate on the quality of another person, instead of either looking at them superficially or just focusing on their external flaws, obviously you're not going to like them. How could you command someone to be like someone you just repulsed by? Think about his neshama. Think about his qualities. Look how the Rebbe looked at people. There's another dimension to everyone, including ourselves. So even though externally it could be that way, but you al tabed al mareh, you don't look at the externals. You look, when you contemplate, it's not just some zgula. You contemplate and it leads you. That itself is the stepping stone to love. That's how you love. How does mature love grow? Not just some type of whim or crush. It comes from a contemplation that gives birth to a feeling. So the contemplation is not an aside. It's not some sideshow. It's part of the process. That's how you come to serious love. Without that, people have natural inclination. They happen to like somebody. They like their face. They like their personality. We all have things we're attracted to. But true love is one that comes where you really appreciate. And if you don't appreciate, you're not going to be able to love something you don't appreciate. Being able to see the neshama in somebody. So in the 3 weeks, that's a good time to start. Stop focusing, number one, on yourself so much. That's step one. Number two, to start focusing on the quality of somebody. Maybe think about somebody you don't like so much. And start asking yourself, why don't you like that person? They were created by God. They have qualities. Why don't you like them? That alone is a good question. Some of us just get stuck. I just don't like that person. Number one, your I is too loud. And number two, the neshama of that person is too low. So you have to quiet down I. What do you mean I? You just say, well, they did something to me. It just rubs me the wrong way. He's arrogant. She's this, she's that. Maybe even true. But that's exactly why it's an Aveda. It's a mitzvah. And it comes to 3 weeks. That's the way we counter the sinas chinam, by focusing and saying, first of all, since when is my I the final say about everything? Weaken the yesh. Bisl men neshama les guf. And number two, strengthen and look at the neshama of a person. And you say, the Gemara talks about the story where he was walking in the street and he saw someone. He said, "Kama mechuar kelizeh." Look how ugly, unbecoming. He was speaking about a person. And the person responded to the Amida and said, Lech le'uman shasani, go to the craftsman that shaped me. Why we told this story? An Ameira should speak that way? Because everybody can get trapped in superficiality. Everybody can get trapped in pettiness and externals. Potato also, Zekeli Vanveh, the Torah says it should have a mezuzah noah, a nice mezuzah, a nice sefer Torah, a nice home, tira noah. Machiva daita shaladim, it broadens a person's, expands their horizons. So he got caught in that. Maybe even for a good reason. But the guy taught him a lesson. He said, but go to the Uman. Who shaped me? That's why the Alter Rebbe says in Perek Lev, Brias. Eivis Brias. Why Brias? Because even if they have no other mila, no other quality, except that they're creatures of God, enough reason to love them. What are you, if not more than a creature of God? Do you have more value? You like yourself more. What's the fundamental value of a human being, if not the divine element that gave us value, put us on this earth? This requires work. It does not come automatically, and especially when you're self-absorbed. You have to weaken the self-absorption and strengthen the ability to let someone else in by recognizing they have qualities, they have milas. Sometimes when you work with people, you realize, I don't have the strength, someone else has the strength I don't have. These are things that cultivate Avos Yisrael. So these are some practical things. Obviously, Simas Lev, focus, care. Read a few letters from the Rebbe that give you good strength about Avos Yisrael. And I believe I answered most of the questions here. Let me see, what else? Yeah, I think this answers all the questions. How you train yourself. And getting beyond yourself. Getting beyond your own self. That's the big challenge. But that's the commitment that we make. Okay. Let's move on to the next subject. Are we making a difference? No dent. Someone writes, though what's really sad, and you being the staunch Chabadnik, unlike me, may disagree, though I never know what you will fall on in each issue. Okay, I apologize now for some of the tone here. It's a little negative, but I decided not to filter this. Some words I'm not going to read, but the general gist goes like this. The Shluchim think they're conquering the world all this time and overtaking and making this place a better one. I hate to say, and you know it, and you can't admit it, so allow the Polish Galiciana to say it, that this is untrue. The world is a worse place than it was 65 years ago when the Rebbe first took reins. In every way it's gotten far, far, far worse, far more dangerous, far more sinful, far more pathetic, far more sad, far more distant from anything holy or moral. Far more removed from basic principles of common sense and decency, far more removed from distinguishing between good and evil, far more disgusting, far more chaotic, far more backwards, far more frightening. This ain't no place for God to dwell within, and I don't see it happening in our generation, beside the fact that I've told you already 1,000 times that it's anyway a zero-sum game, so it's foolish and stupid and meaningless to begin with. For every one we bring closer, we lose two of our own. Your thoughts? Now, I must say this question was not to me. This question was to someone who forwarded to me and asked me to read it. So I just wanted to clarify. Since it was forwarded to me, I'm going to read to you my response and then I'll elaborate. So I wrote back the following. So what is this guy's option? To lay down and die? At least the Shluchim are making an attempt. And the Mishnah says, Hamatzal nefesh achas, matzal elam kule. And if that nefesh achas, that one soul, was your friend or his child, would he also say, who cares, the rest of the world is sinking? His language is not the Sprache Vayid, especially a Torah Yid. You don't have to be a Chabadnik to know, and even a Polish Galiciana can understand, that if Jews throughout our 3,500 years of history would have taken his attitude, which would have been so easy to do, especially after the Holocaust, we would not be here today. I'm saddened to hear cowards hiding behind cynicism. I'm saddened to hear cowards hiding behind cynicism, giving all the excuses why we should not be acting. I would rather die with the fighters than live in peace with the cowards. Ask him if he feels he is part of the problem or part of the solution. And I tried to write, usually commensurate to his tone, to write the same way. And I want to just reiterate this. Number one, who's going to paskin whether the world is a better place or not a better place? How do we know? I submit that the world is absolutely a better place. The fact that you look with myopic vision of what you see right now, everything always looks worse when you look very closely. Look at context. Look at historical context. Look at the freedoms we experience. There are plenty of challenges. Some of them can be seen as Yizbaru v'Yislavnu hadvorim, part of the experience of things have to come out in the open before it gets completely good. But the Rebbe writes, and I've quoted it a number of times in Shuvas B'Yurim, I believe it's in volume 2 of Igrus Kedesh, the Igrus Shima and Tchis HaMesim. The Rebbe writes, responds to someone, in an introduction, and makes it very clear. The world by nature and the way it was created gets better and better. Every mitzvah we've done through history has refined the world. The world is a better place. Now is not the place for me to go prove that. So number one is absolutely disagree with this statement. He decided everything is worse. It's through your eyes, that's how you see it. Number two, as I said, Matzal Nefesh Achas. Who's decided something that's a numbers game? What is this, McDonald's? We're selling shoes. We're selling products. God sent us here for a mission and gave us the power to do whatever we can to transform this world. To start saying that what you did has an impact and not an impact, how do you know what's going on? What are you, a little human being on this earth? That's why I absolutely believe this is cowardice and cynicism. Since there's no names, no one's being insulted here. But it's the attitude of losers is to say, why no one should fight. Why? Because you don't want to? Fine. So call yourself a coward. Say you don't have the strength, you don't have the confidence, and fine. That's your choice. It's also tragic. But to start throwing cold water and saying people are trying, since when do we go by numbers, as I said, the Jewish people? And this is specifically, I'm reading it specifically, Shivasar B'Tammuz, because this attitude is very easy. Many people fall into this attitude. It's not a Jewish approach. I understand that Golus has broken many people, and over the years people have developed, they're worn down, they're drained, and they're bitter, and they're sad, and resigned. But the Rebbe told us how to be proactive, how to be leaders, how to be revolutionaries. We're here to change the world, not to become part of the problem, but to be part of the solution. Enough said, and I just wanted to state that, and in case anybody ever has such feelings, find other people that are confident. We're in a war here, not a physical war, thank God, not bloodshed, but a war against apathy, a war against cynicism, a war against cowards. It's a war of changing the world, and we have changed the world, and we can continue to do so. Sometimes you're zeichen, you see it, sometimes you don't see it immediately. But chazaki tamula she'ein chazeres reikum, as the Rebbe says. It's chazaka. An effort will never be in vain. Will always bear fruit. If you're zeichen, you see it right away. As I said, if not, you see it a little later. The freedoms we experience today, the technologies we experience today, all the developments, the humanitarian elements, are a result of the millions and billions of mitzvahs that have refined the world. Simple as that. It's monach b'kuf, as Chassidus says. It's mamshech eres of atzilas, but it's like closed up. But we're starting to see the glimmers, more than glimmers. We are able to do anything you want as a Jew today, except being cynical. That's up to you. But no, there's no enemies from outside. The enemy is now within, as I've discussed many times here. Let's move on. Are we making a difference? Fine. Mashpia. Dear Rabbi Jacobson, thank you doesn't even start to convey my deep appreciation and awe for your weekly My Life series. Being a bit of a procrastinator, I listened to the first few and then put it off for a long time to listening to the rest. But in the past several weeks, I have started tearing through them on my daily 1.5 hour commute. I certainly don't miss NPR one bit. I have 3 brief questions after listening to episode 65 regarding having a mashpia and friends. 1. I've had mashpiyim in the past, but I've never been able to find someone I fully trust, keeping my most intimate secrets and struggles private. B, who is on my wavelength. How do I conquer these 2 challenges? 2. You mentioned the importance of having good friends. Where is the line drawn between what you discuss with a mashpia versus a close friend? 3. Is there anything that is only ever between a husband and wife and not to be discussed with a mashpia? Thank you. Keep up your holy work with awe and appreciation. Deeply appreciated in return. Thank you for your kind words. I have discussed the issue of mashpiyim in the past, but let me just summarize and add in responding to your questions. At the end of the day, people are not perfect. If a mashpia doesn't work for you, find yourself another mashpia. Yes, a mashpia should be someone you can trust with all your intimate secrets and someone that's on your wavelength. It's very clear. That's the whole point of a mashpia. In the Sikh of Yud Shvat Tov Shel Lamed Zayin, which followed the mashpia Sikh of Yud Kislev Tov Shel Lamed Zayin, the Rebbe came out with a big trask, which has yet to be fulfilled, frankly. he made it clear mashpia comes from the word shefa, means a mashpia has to not be like oyer. Oyer Hashem just radiates and shines anywhere. A mashpia has to be mislabish, has to invest himself, engage and be involved and commensurate to the student, or the makabel, I should say, the person he's a mashpia too, or she's a mashpia too. Women to women, men to men. So, basically, someone that doesn't fit the bill shouldn't be your mashpia. Simple as that. Sometimes one way, if you can't find someone to answer all your issues, try to find a mashpia that's a specialist in a particular issue. Your personal aveda, your personal challenges, or someone else in career related, work related, marriage, shalom bayis related. Sometimes just find someone. If you trust them in small areas, then you can expand. And sometimes you can have a mashpia in several different areas. It's best, obviously, if you could have one in all areas. But it doesn't always work. So I don't like the word shop around, but it basically means interview, check it out, and find. Referrals are critical. Find a friend, ask around. Do you know someone I can speak to about a certain particular topic? And test the waters. It's as simple as that. It is asay l'cha. It requires kfiyah. It requires some type of commitment. But we're talking here, I'm assuming that this is a sincere search. So now it's finding the right match. And sometimes it takes time. But the Rebbe told us we should do it. There's no question, which means we definitely have the ability to do it, the capacity, and just a matter of making the effort. The difference between a friend and a mashpia, the Rebbe has in the Sikh of Sheftim Nun Aleph, a Shiva Shavtayach Kivarashen V'Yitzayach Kivatchila, the difference between Yayitz and Shavtayach, Shefet. The same Mishnah, Sei L'cha Rav, K'nei L'cha Chaver. Basically, a mashpia, generally speaking, not mamish arav, but let's say a mashpia and a rav in the same general category, is more of an authority. A friend, a yoyitz, and a chaver is more of a consultant, like it's more equal to you. You go to a rav or a rav to someone that you want to have a more definitive opinion, someone who's an expert. Not just about halacha, it could be about personal matters too. A friend is more of someone you will have a conversation, casual conversation, you hang around with, someone more equal to you. Now, Kemuvin, you could have someone that's a chaver, rav chaver, there's a talmid chaver, etc., but we're just delineating the general categories. I would say a mashpia is somewhere between a rav and a chaver, in the sense it's more than a chaver, more than just a friend. It's a little more someone you respect and someone a little, probably in a higher standard, what's the word I want to use? I don't want to, not in a superior way, but more knowledgeable, more authoritative, more experienced, someone that you look up to. But generally speaking, that's the general difference, and you need both takim. Because, like the Rebbe speaks in that sikha, authority gives you more of a definitive thing. A chaver gives you more warmth, and something that's more commensurate and more relates to you. So even though a rav also has to relate to you, but it's not as quite as informal and quite as personal as a chaver. Having both is necessary. Asay l'cha rav, k'nei l'cha chaver. The rav is more for the general picture. The chaver could be more to talk it through, how to do it, follow up. And there's many different delineated differences that can be defined. You don't need to use a mashpia or a rav as much if you have a good chaver, but you would use them for bigger questions or general direction. Sometimes you won't learn with your mashpia, you'll learn chavrusa with your chaver. So they have different roles, and I could elaborate more, but I think it's enough said. Is there anything you can do between husband and wife that not discuss the mashpia? Absolutely. That apitera, ben ish v'ishtei, there are things that are between ish v'ishtei, especially intimacy and so on, who says you have to discuss with the mashpia. If there's an issue, there's a challenge, even then one has to discover what yes, what not. But a husband and wife is not a wife and a husband are not chaver, not rav. Asay l'cha rav, k'nei l'cha chaver is not referring to your husband or wife. Husband and wife is a whole different category, and there's many personal things that are connected to their own life that don't have to at all be discussed with the mashpia. It all comes down to the case by case in the situation. One more question, then we'll go to the essays of this week that we will be reviewing. Refusal of paying debt back. Hi, Rabbi Jacobson. What can be done in my situation? I lent my colleague a large sum of money back in November 2014, and I haven't gotten anything back from him. What would the Rebbe suggest that I do? Should I forget about it and say, no, I was meant to lose it anyway? So no worries. Should I constantly try and call, text, WhatsApp him weekly? Anytime I ask him about it, he always shrugs it off by giving me a lame excuse of how he can't pay me back. The way I feel from being burnt like this is that it's very difficult, if at all possible, to loan someone even in dire circumstances, because how can I trust that I will get my money back? Should I write an article about him to protect other people from giving him money like I did? Please advise. Okay. Though I chose to read this, let's be honest, this is a halacha question and not necessarily a chassidus applied question, even though there is some chassidishkeit involved here. But let's start with halacha. You have to ask a Rav. No. The idea of Ahavas Yisrael, or turning the other cheek, it doesn't apply when you gave someone a loan with understanding that they're going to repay it. Suddenly to become and suddenly forgive it. Listen, you want to forgive it, that's your business. But the guy, that other person has a chiyuv. There's a halachic responsibility of him taking a loan from you, and he has to repay it. How do you enforce that? Well, maybe you need to call Tadin Teira. Simple as that. It's not pleasant if you're not ready to forgo. And maybe you want to say, okay, I got burned, I'll swallow it and move on, and be more prudent or more careful next time. Maybe have an orev, a guarantor. There's halachic elements. This is not the first time someone has taken money from someone and has not repaid. There's Teira for this. There's Shulchan Aruch for this reason. We live, unfortunately, in a world of Alma de Shikra. People either distorted maliciously or unintentionally, whatever the reason is, took money, didn't realize he's not going to be able to pay back, let him pay in a payment plan. There's ways to deal with this. You can't afford it, so pay smaller. If you're completely denying, doesn't want to pay, I can't pay back, then you may have to enforce it. And there's halachic ways, and I would refer you to go to a Rav, a competent Rav, who'll tell you what to do halachically and give you your options. I don't think you need me for that. As far as the chassidishkeit of it goes, listen, if you want to be ma'aver al medesav and you want to forgive, obviously it'll go for probably a schar for you. I don't know if it's necessarily healthy for the other person for you to do that. You want to do that in your ratzon hatev, you could do that. But here he's forcing you to do it. So I don't know if it's in his benefit. That's something that needs to be looked at. But that's your call. I don't think there's much more to say on this topic. It's sad to hear about this. There's halachas for these things. Maybe he thinks he doesn't owe it for some reason. Maybe there's some other misunderstanding. I don't know all the circumstances. I can't comment on the details. That's why I go back. You have to ask a Rav, and if there's more questions that you think I can address, please write to us. Okay. One more thing I wanted to discuss, but the time is running out, so I'll leave it for the next episode, which is continuation of the discussion of the mind-body dualism or materialism of the Professor Bloom that was asked to me about this last week. So I have some very interesting insights that I would like to share that I didn't have the time to discuss last week. So let's leave that for the next episode, and I'll go straight to the essays. So we have 3 essays as we've been doing. This is all part of the essay contest that we ran back of Dalet Teva's time, right before Pesach. We announced on Chav Zayin Adar the winners, and the essays continue to amaze, continue to fascinate. They're all being posted slowly at meaningfullife.com/mylife/contest. And we will do 3 essays as we do a summary of the 3, congratulating them again for their work, and sharing it with others is just a fascinating contribution. I really, really feel frustrated. I'm not using it to the fullest, but more will come. I'm working on different projects and ideas. A lot has grown out of this, and the Pul Nimshachas, the perpetual impact that it's had has been tremendous. I will share more when we have more time and when I hear more details. So the 3 essays are 1 in Hebrew and 2 in English. The first essay is a Hebrew one, translated into English, titled Auditory Learning to Support a Healthy Attention Span, by Asi Spiegel, age 46, Sfas, Israel. So basically, he addresses the issue of concentration by students today, not the issue in the medical sense of the word, but due to all the distractions of technology, smartphones, and so on. How do you get attention what are the methods of getting attention? And he develops it based on an audio approach. He says, usually you think of visual as being the most powerful, but based on Chassidus, quoting a number of Sichos and Maimorim, and I'll refer a few of them, Likutei Sichos Chelik Vov, and a very good, powerful Eira Teira in, where's the Eira Teira? Here, he quotes the Eira Teira, Nach, Amud Tov Tov Kuf Aleph, that would be 901, page 901 in Eira Teira Nach, showing that though Riyah, in a Dema Shmiel Riyah, that Riyah is always seen, sight, and vision is seen as a more powerful element, it brings in Chassidus, and the Rebbe explains it in a number of places, that Riyah is tefus more the gashmis of something, the physical, and Shmiya is tefus grasps more the spiritual, the ethereal component. And develops based on that we need to have a revolution quickly in audio learning and developing audio because its power to reach people in the depths of their soul has a power that even the visual does not have. So it's an interesting take, a little counterintuitive, but focusing on the idea of Shema Yisrael, Shema, HaKel Kel Yankiv, and suggesting a whole bunch of elements of how Shmiya sound and audio can have a tremendous and dramatic impact on opening up the receptivity of students, and especially people who are not concentrating and have low level attention spans. Yeah. How Shmiya also opens up the power of imagination, and how we see that Jews throughout the years studied Baal Peh, which was oral interpretation, which was all through listening and absorbing. The golden age of audio. That we should launch the golden age of audio and how to develop this in schools and in educational systems and so on. So I recommend you all read this. It's, as I said, posted on meaningfullife.com/mylife/contest. And let's go to the next essay. The next essay is it's called Choosing Life in a World Preoccupied by Death. An application of Chassidus-based mindfulness by Avi Kamen, Crown Heights Jewish Community Council, Crown Heights. Okay, this is a completely new angle, completely about life and death. Quoting at the outset Hassan Nasrallah, Secretary General of Hezbollah, that says we are going to win because they love life and we love death. And in contrast, Lahavdil, the Torah says, I put before you today life and death, choose life. Anyway, he develops an essay based on a threefold structure provided by Chassidus and the application of that structure to enable mankind to overcome death with life. As he writes, life and death are more than presence or absence of a heartbeat or a brainwave. As the song goes, he not busy being born is busy dying. The lyric refers to the pain of an unfulfilled life. So there it goes on to speak about how we get to that fulfilled life when we're imprisoned by one's own habitual ways of viewing reality, entangled in the dark straits of the animal soul. A method based on three dimensions of das, knowledge, as explained in Chassidus, quoting from Eter, Mishpatim, the Maimer of Mishpatim in Eter, as well as Teireh. Hakara, as he calls brain recognition, Hargosha, heart feeling, and Hiskashu is body connecting. And develops this into a very powerful method of 3 steps. In each one, what we can do and how do you implement that. Connecting with people in the first one, which is Hakara, whose spiritual level you wish to attain. Societal global, create a media lab to nurture and implement world-class multimedia artifacts which embody the heart and soul of Torah. I'm not going to read it all because it's all again online. Check it out. Then he goes to Hargosha, heart feeling, both on an individual and a societal level. Seek out art, music, film, which express the natural drive of the soul for godliness. So a very global type of vision and perspective on how to take Chassidus and apply it to real life situations of really creating transformation. So I personally gravitate to these type of ideas. They're very global, they're universal, and very fascinating to read as well. Goes on to Hiskashu's body doing. Again, a little taste. Develop the practice of mitzvahs, learn what they are, and practice them regularly. Daily giving of charity. And societal global, the Torah teaches that all mankind can connect to true life via the 7 mitzvahs commanded to all. And he brings also a measure of this method's value is its ability to empower individuals, and that can be measured. Again, a very good essay. I commend you for this, and I encourage everyone to read that as well online. If you also subscribe to our weekly newsletter, we'll send it to you. We send out a weekly new essay every week. Okay. And finally, essay number 3, which is Pain and Suffering by Myrtle Deitch, age 19, Machon Bina Seminary, Crown Heights. She opens up. Can you go on with your life when hit over the head with tragedy? Can a mother who lost her child go on to be a functional human being? Can a man whose entire business is lost, leaving him penniless, still function as the leader of his family? Can a girl who lost her father as a mere 13-year-old go on to build her own family and be a positive person? Very well written. She continues, I grew up in a family where Chassidus is like a drug. The same way a father might suggest that his child take antidepressants, when necessary, my father would suggest to us, go learn chapter 22 of Tanya, or let's review what Laskil Chabina teaches us. Very moving to hear, in a positive way. And she goes on to explain how Chassidus gives us a multiple-step process of dealing with grief. Grieving the tragedy, and she brings the tragic story of the untimely death of my niece Rashi Minkowitz over a year ago. Grieving, recognizing the source of the tragedy, that's step 2, and also brings some episodes how this was implemented. And step 3, move on. Use the tragedy as a reason to come closer to God and be a better person. Very well done, despite the sad circumstances. Unfortunately, relevant still in our time, latest tragedies that have happened. And but she also connects it with real life stories, how people actually use Chassidic concepts in each of these in different tragedies in the last few years to build a life based on these 3 steps. So conclusion, when hit with misfortune, grieve it, remember where it came from, that in fact it is a good because it's coming from a hidden world, and use it to move on and be a better, more spiritual person than before. So, very well done as well. We shouldn't need to know things like this, but Chassidus comes to address all issues, including the painful ones of life. So now let's make our conclusion here. This has been My Life Chassidus Applied, episode 74, where you can submit your personal questions completely anonymously every week, 8 to 9 p.m. Every week Sunday, I should say, every Sunday, 8 to 9 p.m. And we're ready through 74 episodes. As I said, we've also now launched a new feature called the iTunes. You can download podcasts and so on. And we will continue this episode next week with new topics. Everyone should have a simchadika, in the halachadika way of transforming these darker days into simcha and joy, and recognize that we're otot at the geula, and really these old days are meant to be hafchi yom meil nesasin l'simcha l'moedim tevim. It should all be transformed to joyous days and to holidays and great holidays, and way we do that is by doing our effort and applying chassidus and revealing the goodness and the kedusha, the holiness, and the opportunities that lie even sometimes embedded in darker places. Everyone have a very pleasant week.